Good evening and welcome to the International Great Black Read Aloud Day. It is day 15 and it is our farming gardening day. And we are excited about reading again. And we're glad to be here with you at an earlier hour tonight than we were last night. And so um, we're going to read tonight. And we want to tell you that here at the International Great Black Read Aloud Day, we are here giving voice to words written by Black people all around the world. And it is our pleasure, and part of our mission is to encourage the exploration, the purchase, and reading of books written by Black people. And we read for educational purposes only to introduce all different types of genres of literature written by Black people. And so that's why we're here and we enjoy doing it. And so we thank you for tuning in. Again, we are making our way through February and we're holding pretty fast. We're only down one day, and that's Thriller Day. And I'll be back with that. And hopefully tomorrow, I think, we're going to read our thriller selection. And tonight is farming and gardening. I should say my name is LD Robinson, and I am your reader for tonight. And I should also tell you that this is brought to you by Ladero Design Works and the Fresh Book Festival, where literacy is a legacy. And so we are partners with Fresh Book Festival in bringing words to life for you, as we share just a portion for, and just to, as I said, for educational purposes, we share just a portion of the books that we purchase so that we can read. And so and show you all these different types of literature that are put out by Black people. It is as diverse. The literature that is written is as diverse as we are, and so it's a joy. So today is gardening and farming day, and we read on this day. We read something about gardening and farming and how that works to what it feels like for Black farmers. And this today we'll do something a little different because we're actually coming from a novel this time. And our selection for today is The Farm: A Boy's Journey into Manhood, by Larry Perodin. And I'm going to put up the cover so that you can see it and remind yourself when you're out in the bookstore that this is something that you want to read. It is a good read. And there is the cover. It's called The Farm: A Boy's Journey into Manhood by Larry Perodin. And we're going to get back to our selection and we're going to read. And so we're going to read from two chapters. One's going to be The Return, and then we're going to read about Mother Nature and the farm, which is very good. All right, so let's read. I got the news and raced as fast as I could to get back in town. My mind drifted, not really sure of anything. Suddenly, the flashing lights of a state trooper snapped me out of the fog I was in. I was speeding. Normally, I might protest, but my mind would not let me. I simply thanked the officer and took the ticket. It was not that important. My grandmother had died, the family matriarch, my childhood mentor, my overseer on the plantation or farm. It was not all that surprising. She had been in declining health, yet it seemed surreal, the thought that she's gone. I think the last blow came when my grandmother was moved against her will into the home of her daughter, my mother. She resisted. All she wanted, excuse me, was her farm. She fought mightily. I want to stay at my own house. But her once thundering voice was reduced to a raised whisper. Pneumonia had set in. Her incredible strength zapped, barely able to stand. My grandmother's name, or as she was called, was Foam. What it meant, where it came from, I had no idea. Her given name was Louise, though no one ever used it. Foam, the name sounds like home. That's what her name reminds me of home. A home is not a house, a structure, regardless of how grand. Foam epitomized home. A home is inviting. A home is warm, loving. A home is joyous. A home is where you bring your pain, your sorrows. A home is where you share your joy, success, where you encourage, nurture. Foam was the oldest of a large the oldest of a large clan. Born in the late 1800s, I knew she had to be strong to keep the large brood of both men and women in line. Still, she had to be nurturing for the younger siblings. There was Joe, John, Leona, Lawrence, Emily, Connie, Marie, Leontine, Irma, Gilbert, Martin, Charlie, and Jane. I was told the family lost a young sibling in a house fire, though it was seldom, if ever, talked about. Seems the young child was left alone in the house while everyone else was in the fields working. How the fire started was not clear. By the time family members reached her, she was severely burned. One can only imagine the pain a burned child endured. Medical attention was scarce for Negroes in those days. She suffered a few days and then God mercifully took her. There may have been other family members that did not survive. I could not be sure. I know her death affected grandmother. Perhaps she felt partly responsible. The farm she yearned for, called home, was her special place. It was gifted to her by a very rich white man, Mr. Gray. At the time, some speculated that he was one of Louisiana's largest landowners and one of its richest residents. At least the use of the farm was hers for as long as she lived, to do whatever she wanted, as if it were her own very piece of ground. Even after Mr. Gray died, his heirs would not tell her she had to go, or much anything else about what she did on the farm. We were never sure or certain of any agreement on the land, verbal or in writing. All we know is what grandmother told us. Mr. Gray said I don't ever have to leave this place. For her, it didn't have to be in writing. Had they tried to put her off, there would have been a fight, a big fight. I do not believe she would have gone quietly. The land was part of her, and thankfully, Mr. Gray's heirs gave her quiet possession of the land. I often wondered about their relationship. Of course, she was a gifted cook and probably cooked and cleaned for Mr. Gray, made him feel special, even as his health failed and he was reduced to an invalid. In short, he had to have loved her, not in the physical sense, but in the maternal sense. She was the epitome of the old mammy. She could be firm with her overseer without ruffling his feathers. If the doctor said no, then she would not give in to his want of a cigar or drink of hard liquor. Her word ruled. She must have had compassion for him in his infirm state. Before there was such a thing as hospices, she was his comforting soul. To encourage him, he probably had a favorite dish she would prepare at his request. She had the ability to cook anything to perfection, all on her wood-burning stove. She had no desire for gas or electric stoves. She would bake all sorts of treats in the oven of the old wood stove. I watched her prepare the miracle of homemade bread, called light bread. It was so unbelievable to see it, so soft, so moist. I wondered, how is it possible in a wood stove? All I can figure is that Mr. Gray's last words as it related to grandmother were, she has to be left alone. Whether it was in writing, part of his last will and testament, we can only speculate. Of course, as poor blacks, we would never know anyway. Oh, she could leave the farm any time she wanted, but she would never even consider it. My mother would often complain, why don't you leave that old farm and those old chickens? The suggestion was sacrilegious. You may as well cut her heart out. After Mr. Gray died, his sister, Miss Matilda Gray, would pay Grandma a visit every now and then. When Miss Gray would come to visit, it was an event. My grandmother was so excited, like the Queen of England was on her way. She spruced up around the old house and yard as best she could. Grandma would tell her brother, Uncle Mott, to clean up around that old barn, get rid of some of that junk out front. I don't know why they bothered. I'm sure Miss Gray had her spies. She knew well what was going on around the farm. On that given day, Miss Gray would arrive in her chauffeur-driven big black Cadillac. What a sight that was! A real driving Miss Daisy photo op. My grandmother might have some fresh cut flowers in a basket from her garden, a small token of respect. Every year, Grandma would have Uncle Mont plant a row of daisies along each side of the little road. The little road was a path that led to the farmhouse from the highway. In bloom, the multicolored flowers was a pleasant but stark contrast to the weather-beaten old farmhouse. Whatever vegetables were in season, she'd have them prepared, cleaned, and cut. I think Miss Gray especially enjoyed Grandma's homemade pecan candy. She always had some waiting. If in season, she had pecans picked and shelled, ready to hand over to Miss Gray. The visit was cordial, like two old friends from different worlds. They would sit under the pecan tree and talk for a brief spell. As a young boy, I would stand in the background out of sight, wondering what could these two old friends be discussing. They seemed to have nothing in common. The visit was never long. Soon the Cadillac would slowly ease off and things would be back to normal. We all could take a deep breath. At least that's how I felt. My grandmother was always at ease. I took my cue from Uncle Mott, on edge, like she's about to put us off the farm. The farm wasn't much to look at. A rundown old house with nary a modern convenience. If you're old enough, you might remember the Ma and Pa Kettle on the farm movies. The movies could have been filmed on the farm. It could stand a lot of sprucing. To Grandma, the farm was more than a home. It was her sanctuary. The outside world and its modern conveniences were a million miles away. She was happy, content with things just the way they were. She wouldn't dream of having it any other way. She seemed to have no problems, no concerns on the farm. The farm sat on about 80 acres of land, mostly farmland, a wooded forest, and an open meadow. Not much to look at back then, yet I imagine in the good old days it was a showplace of sorts. The center of the farm was the big house. It probably dated back to the 1920s or 30s. It was a classic Victorian style two-story home. I greatly admired its wraparound screened porch. It had a huge water tower in the back that gave it running water with the modern conveniences of a kitchen and bath. I think Mr. Gray would come to the farm for a respite, to have his parties or to get away from the hectic city life, maybe. Nearby was a can house and potato house where produce was stored, and this brick smokehouse sat to the side where meats were smoked, though I never saw it used as such. Those were the names I heard them called. Past them was the barn and crib with an attached work shed. The corral and horse stalls were attached to the side of the barn. To the rear was the pig pens. The wood shed was a building with sides but no front or rear. That's where all the wood for cooking and heating was stored to keep them out of the elements. The chicken house and yard, an assortment of cages and pens for animals, sat near the old farmhouse. The farmhouse was nothing more than a sharecropper's shack. It sat about 100 yards from the highway and the big house. It had no modern conveniences. It was basic. Some years after initial construction, a small kitchen was added on to its 4 rooms and hall. It fit her simplicity well. As she was forced into her new living arrangement, I know all she was thinking. What about my house? Who was going to tend to my chickens, pick up them eggs? How was Uncle Mott going to manage? She did all the cooking, all the house chores, made sure the bills were paid. She was always busy, in the yard, in the kitchen. How would the farm go on without her? As I pulled off the interstate, my first stop was the farm. I knew she wasn't there physically, but she was there in spirit. She would always be there, so I stopped by to visit with her in spirit. I could see her walking about slowly. Her chickens, geese, ducks, and turkeys followed close behind her and to her side. They waited patiently as she tossed feed from her apron. There were more animals. They were more than animals to her. Theirs was a special relationship. To look about the farm was surreal. Without her presence, the farm was a meaningless plot of ground. I walked about the grounds. It seemed empty of life. These grounds had been my nemesis when I first arrived. Later on, it became my ally, my friendly escape. then eventually from where I had to escape. I stood there on the land, reminiscing about the old days. So many emotions raced through my mind. I thought about the old farm. Here I spent most of my childhood under the watchful eye of my grandmother. The memories began to ooze to the surface. And then we're going to read from The Farm and Mother Nature. More than anything, the weather could have a profound effect on a farm. In the heat of a dry summer, crops could dry up and wither away. There was no such thing as irrigation. All the hard work of spring frittered away with the wind. You watched, and there was nothing you could do. The summer's heat could be oppressive. There was no escape. You had to stay outside as long as you could. I'd sit under the big pecan tree as long as possible. During the sweltering summer nights, I lay across my bed with my head atop the window ledge. My nose almost touched the window screen. In the dead of a summer's night, it was my hope to catch an occasional soft breeze. I was seeking refuge from the stifling heat. Most nights the air was dead still. My grandmother would lay across her bed. There was no window next to it. Sweat rolled off her cheeks continuously. For respite, she fanned herself continuously until she fell asleep. As the steamy night prolonged, my mind eased. I was serenaded to a night concert courtesy of Mother Nature. On cue, the conductor signaled begin. First, the twangs of countless crickets chirped and chirped. Then nearby whippoorwills chimed in, sounding their namesake. An old owl hooted as if he didn't want to feel left out. On and on they sounded. The night conductor signaled for the brass section, and the trains began to sound. In the distance, the slow, loud, clamoring clank, clank, clank of a freight train sounded. Then their screeching brakes clashed and squeaked along the iron rails. Thundering clacks sounded as the tracks were switched. Then click, click, click as the train reversed its tracks. A blaring horn sounded in the distance, then got louder. The nearing sound drowned every other sound. The 11 o'clock passenger train from New Orleans whizzed by. The freight train paused for its turn, then the clanking started anew. Some nights were filled with a wailing pack of hounds, and then a boom, boom, boom sounded, as if there were distant cannons waging war. They were the sound of a poacher's shotgun in hot pursuit of raccoons or possums. On some nights, if I was lucky, I'd spy a falling star in the distance and quickly make a wish. You lay there and prayed for the cooling respite of rain. Even a shower would have been wonderful. Yet you wouldn't have to shut your window in a shower. You let the soft raindrops flung by the wind kiss your face. It was so refreshing. The rain pushed the salt from your pores into your mouth, and that was okay. Rain was of paramount importance on the farm. If there was no rain or sparse rain, that was a problem on the farm. Water holes used for farm animals dried up. Crops burned up from the hot sun. A paltry crop was all we could expect after a prolonged drought. Uncle Mont would lament, if it doesn't rain soon, it won't be as much worth picking. Most would be just for the hogs. He would sit staring at the sky, then at his crops. His face grimaced as if he was in physical pain, anguish. Without rain, there was no drinking water. Water barrels were bone dry. If need be, we'd hitch up the mules to the sled and haul barrels of water from my Aunt Team's or mother's house. There was nothing more fun than racing those mules pulling a sled. As soon as we got out of Uncle Mont's view, we laid into the mules and they took off. Of course, on occasion the sled flipped and we'd have to start all over. Good thing water was cheap back then. On the other hand, if it rained too much, the waterlogged crops could easily rot. Once again, Uncle Mont stared at the heavens for relief. Regardless of the amount, most on the farm loved the rain. For one, it was a reprieve from the sweltering heat. We just prayed for the proper amount of rain. It was the lifeblood of the farm. A good rain could come from out of nowhere. With no TV, Uncle Mott might forecast the weather. Uncle Mott might stretch out his hand. A stiffness might signal a sure change was on the way. Perhaps the wind might swirl a certain way. He looked up and asserted, "There's a storm's on the ways." Sure enough, there was a change in the air we could all detect. It started with a sudden light flash in the distance. If you were outdoors, your face was treated to the bath of a delightfully cooled breeze. The animals became agitated, flapping their wings, especially the ducks and geese. They could sense the rain. It was in the air. A slow drum beat followed. It got louder as it stood atop you. Then the slow pitter patter of rain sounded on the tin roof. Then came a steady drum roll, interrupted by the big bass sound of exploding thunder. Boom, boom, boom. The dogs hurriedly sought shelter under the house. A light show of crisscrossing streaking lightning flash. Suddenly, the heavy downpour was upon us like a herd of thundering bison rushing across the tin roof. You could hear the rainwater splashing and gushing down the roof valley, splattering as it hit the ground. As the rain subsided, the toad frogs croaked loudly as they were pushed from their flooded homes. Birds, disturbed from nesting, flitted by and chirped. Me, I love the rain too. It was as if it was a cleansing of the farm. Sometimes I sit inside and listen to the pouring rain hitting the tin roof. It made a sound like no other, louder as the rain poured down, lower as the rain slacked. If it was lightning, everything was turned off in the house for fear of a lightning strike. We sat quietly in the house, waiting for it to pass. If it wasn't lightning, sometimes I would walk in the rain, just to watch the newly created streams that fed down to the coulee. I would throw something into the stream, a piece of wood, a handmade boat, then follow it until it disappeared, from the furrows of the fields into newly created ditches, and finally into the waterfall that fed into the coulee. If it was a hard rain, afterwards me and my sisters or cousins walked out to the pastures in search of turtles. We all wanted the wee green turtles for pets. Mostly all we found were the common box turtles. Those we played with until we got tired of them, just trying to get them to stick their heads out of their shell. If it was a deluge of rain, we ran out along the ditches that ran along the railroad tracks. If we could find a hole deep enough with red clay, it made for a nice clean pool to swim and play in. Sometimes we settled for the filthy duck pond, running off the ducks if Grandma wasn't looking. The farm animals danced in the rain. The ducks and geese made so much noise, it was like a celebration. When the rain concert was over, they ran about clapping their wings as if wanting an encore. They might swim in the duck pond, which was nothing more than a big hole in the ground. The chickens, turkeys loved the rain. It had forced all sorts of insects, worms up from the soil. The hogs loved the rain as they wallowed in the mud. It covered their bodies and kept them cool when the hot sun returned. The crops loved the rain. They sprouted almost immediately. As if it was close to harvest time, it would be, and if it was close to harvest time, it would be a good crop. Uncle Mott's prayers were answered. It meant money from his hard work in the field for certain. Grandma loved the rain. It meant fresh drinking water. The rain poured into her carefully placed barrels along the farmhouse, filling them with plenty of water. The farm had to have rain to survive, but we always feared too much rain. The old farmhouse walls still displayed high water marks from Hurricane Audrey that struck in 1957. I looked at those marks and wondered, how did anyone survive? On occasion, I watched as waters from the coulee would creep ever so close to the back of the house. Water might even seep into the very back of the house. We were always fearful and watchful for water moccasins coming inside. Good or bad, outside of air, nothing was more important than rain on a farm. For drinking, for cooking, for bathing, for the animals, the crops. We just had to have it to survive. And this has been our selection from The Farm, A Boy's Journey into Manhood by Larry Perodin. And we will put up our cover again so that you can see it. And hold on, let me hide the banner. And here we are. Here is our cover for our selection today for gardening and farming. It is The Farm, A Boy's Journey into Manhood, again by Larry Perodin. Tomorrow, um, we will be back with another selection. Tomorrow is day 16. It is Jazz and Music Day. And so we will be back with a great selection for you concerning jazz and music. And so we've had some interesting selections over the years for jazz and music. And so we're excited about our one for tomorrow as well. And we hope you will tune in tomorrow for another selection as we are here at the International Great Black Read Aloud Day 2026 version. My name is LD Robinson. I am your reader, and we will see you tomorrow. Have a good night, or morning, or afternoon, depending on where you are.